Welcome back to Crypto Equation, and today we are stepping into a topic that every digital asset holder eventually confronts, but almost no one ever fully understands the anatomy of a crash, and more importantly, how XRP not only survives market crashes, but reveals its true design during them. Crashes test belief, they test conviction, they test understanding, and they expose who is holding an asset because they understand its architecture, and who is holding it because they followed noise. And when we look closely at XRP's history, we find something extraordinary, something that repeats itself every time the market collapses, something that gives long-term holders a blueprint for understanding why XRP behaves the way it does, and why so many institutions keep their eyes silently locked on it, even in moments when retail investors panic. This blueprint is not about predicting the future. It is not about guaranteeing outcomes. It is about understanding the deeper forces behind XRP's resilience, forces that have nothing to do with speculation and everything to do with settlement, architecture, liquidity, transformation, interoperability, and the modernization of global payment rails. Because when the market crashes, speculation collapses first, but infrastructure survives. Noise collapses. Architecture remains. To understand why XRP survives crashes, we must first understand what a crash really is. A crash is not simply the market falling. A crash is the removal of excess belief. It is the stripping away of emotional overconfidence. It is the clearing out of positions held for the wrong reasons. It exposes the difference between assets built on hype and assets built on purpose. And in every major crash, we see the same phenomenon: the assets built on hype collapse and disappear, while the assets built for system-level functionality survive, reorganize, recalibrate, and continue preparing for the long term. XRP's history is filled with moments where the market fell apart around it, but its purpose remained intact. When retail sentiment collapsed, XRP's institutional development continued. When speculation evaporated, settlement testing continued. When narratives shifted, infrastructure integrations quietly moved forward. XRP survives crashes because its role in the digital economy does not depend on market enthusiasm. It depends on global financial architecture. This is the first lesson in the long-term holder blueprint: understanding the difference between an asset built for speculation and an asset built for settlement. When an asset's entire narrative depends on hype, it collapses when the hype collapses. But XRP does not depend on hype. It depends on the evolution of global payment systems, and those systems continue evolving regardless of market cycles. Now let us go deeper. Every crash reveals a truth about liquidity. In hype-driven markets, liquidity flows in recklessly and flows out even faster. But in utility-driven systems, liquidity behaves differently. Utility creates consistent demand for liquidity flows. Utility creates structural purpose. Utility creates resilience. XRP's purpose is tied to liquidity movement, not liquidity speculation. And this brings us to one of the most important truths about why XRP survives crashes. XRP was engineered for a world where liquidity is mobile, not trapped. The old financial system traps liquidity in pre-funded accounts scattered across the world. Trapped liquidity cannot respond to market shocks. It cannot move efficiently. It breaks under pressure. Mobile liquidity, however, is resilient because it adjusts instantly to global flows. And XRP was designed for mobile liquidity. This is why long-term holders recognize something most people overlook. XRP's purpose becomes more obvious when markets collapse because crashes expose the weaknesses of systems built on inefficiency. Now let us explore another layer of the blueprint: the architecture behind XRP's resilience. XRP is not a company. It is not a corporate product. It is an open ledger that settles value in real time. It is not dependent on a centralized organization for survival. It continues functioning even when the world around it is in chaos. In every crash, the same truth emerges: assets dependent on centralized hype collapse. First, assets dependent on structural purpose remain. To understand why this matters, we must examine the behavior of institutions during crashes. Institutions do not abandon systems based on market emotions. They abandon systems based on lack of long-term viability. And institutions continue exploring modern settlement solutions because the global financial system is in a crisis of inefficiency. When the market falls apart, institutions do not reassess whether they want instant settlement. They do not reconsider whether trapped liquidity is a good idea. They do not decide to return to messaging systems from the 1970s. They continue modernizing. They continue upgrading. They continue preparing for a world where value moves in real time. And that world is the world XRP was built for. This is why crashes do not damage the long-term relevance of XRP. They only damage the narratives surrounding it. Narratives are fragile. Architecture is not. Now let us examine the psychology of a crash, because long-term resilience is not just technical, it is emotional. In every market cycle, fear becomes amplified during downturns. Fear distorts perspective. Fear magnifies noise. Fear causes people to forget the reason they entered a system in the first place. The long-term holder blueprint is built around emotional immunity, understanding that the short-term noise surrounding XRP has nothing to do with the long-term role it is designed to play. When markets crash, the future of global settlement does not disappear. The inefficiencies of cross-border payment rails do not magically fix themselves. The need for real-time global liquidity does not evaporate. The long-term holder recognizes that a crash only affects perception, not infrastructure. The second key to the long-term blueprint is understanding messaging and settlement architecture. The world is migrating to ISO 2022, the new global standard for financial messaging. This upgrade is happening regardless of market conditions. Crashes do not slow this migration. Crashes do not delay modernization. Crashes do not stop institutions from updating outdated systems. ISO 20022 is becoming the backbone of global payments, and settlement systems built for this standard are increasing in relevance year after year. XRP's alignment with this messaging upgrade is structural, not speculative. This alignment does not disappear during a crash. It becomes even more noticeable. Now let us explore the third principle of the blueprint, the decoupling of purpose from price. XRP is one of the few digital assets whose long-term purpose is unrelated to its short-term price behavior. In fact, during crashes, price becomes a distraction from its broader role. Because XRP's relevance lies in its ability to settle value instantly across borders at a fraction of the cost of traditional rails. When long-term holders understand this truth, they stop evaluating XRP through the lens of short-term volatility and begin evaluating it through the lens of global utility. And utility survives crashes. Now let us examine one of the most misunderstood truths about XRP. Its resilience comes from the fact that it does not require speculation to achieve purpose. Most digital assets collapse during long-term market downturns because their value proposition requires ongoing excitement. XRP's value proposition requires modernization of global payment systems, and modernization is not optional for the world economy. This brings us to one of the most powerful parts of the long-term holder blueprint, understanding the inevitability of global transformation. The world is moving toward instant settlement, real-time messaging, interoperable financial networks, mobile liquidity, tokenized value movement, digitally programmable finance. Each of these trends is irreversible. Each of these trends accelerates during global instability. Each of these trends increases the relevance of systems built for instant settlement. And XRP exists directly inside these long-term trends. Now let us explore the next principle: crashes reveal infrastructure the way storms reveal structural weakness. Assets built on hype crumble. Assets built on purpose stand firm. This is why long-term XRP holders become calmer with every crash, because each market downturn removes the noise and reveals the architecture. The blueprint teaches that what survives a crash is what was meant to survive the system that can operate independently of market speculation, the asset that continues functioning even when the world is in chaos, the technology that solves a problem the world cannot ignore. XRP survives because the world's requirement for fast settlement does not disappear when price falls. Now let us examine the next layer: regulatory evolution. The world is crafting digital asset frameworks country by country, region by region. Regulation is one of the strongest signals of long-term relevance because governments do not build frameworks for systems they believe will disappear. The regulatory evolution around XRP continues even during market downturns because regulation is tied to systemic modernization, not speculative optimism. This reveals a crucial truth for the long-term holder: crashes do not interrupt global policy direction. Governments do not stop creating digital currency frameworks because the market corrected. Institutions do not cancel modernization plans because of volatility. The blueprint reminds us that while the market lives in cycles, infrastructure lives in timelines. Now, let us go deeper into the blueprint's emotional foundation. Long-term conviction is not based on faith, it is based on understanding. Understanding removes fear. Understanding reduces emotional volatility. Understanding creates stability. Understanding protects clarity during chaos. People panic during crashes when they do not know what they are holding. People stay calm when they understand what they are holding. Understanding is the backbone of the long-term blueprint. Now let us explore the core pillars that explain why XRP continually survives market crashes. Pillar 1: long-term institutional development. XRP's integrations with financial institutions continue through crashes because institutions operate based on long-term planning, not speculative euphoria. Pillar 2 settlement use case. XRP was designed for real-time settlement of global value, a need that remains constant regardless of price action. Pillar 3, alignment with financial modernization. The world is upgrading payment rails, messaging standards, liquidity systems, and digital identity frameworks, and XRP naturally aligns with this modernization. Pillar 4, resilience through decentralization. XRP Ledger continues operating independently of external conditions. Pillar 5, liquidity mobility. XRP is built for a liquidity model that eliminates pre-funding inefficiency. Pillar 6, regulatory integration. XRP remains part of ongoing regulatory conversations globally, which signals endurance. These pillars explain why XRP behaves differently during major downturns. And this brings us to the final part of the blueprint. For part 1, recognizing the difference between temporary price volatility and long-term systemic positioning. Short-term volatility is emotional. Long-term positioning is structural. Short-term volatility is chaotic. Long-term positioning is predictable. Short-term volatility creates panic. Long-term positioning creates clarity. The blueprint teaches that XRP survives crashes because its relevance does not come from market cycles, but from global financial transformation. In the second half of this script, we will explore the mechanics of survival, how XRP behaves during downturns, why long-term holders develop stronger conviction during chaos, how global trends increase the relevance of XRP, and how understanding this blueprint can protect your clarity in the face of future volatility. Because now that we have uncovered the foundation of XRP's resilience, we must step deeper into the mechanics of how it survives crashes and why long-term holders often emerge from downturns with stronger conviction instead of fear. A crash in the digital asset market is not a random event. It is a system reset designed to expose the truth behind every asset. And the truth behind XRP becomes clearer during chaos. When markets panic, the noise disappears, the hype evaporates, and the only thing left standing is purpose. To understand the mechanics of survival, you must first examine volatility through the lens of utility. Volatility affects assets differently, depending on whether they rely on speculation or structure. Speculative assets collapse when confidence collapses because their value depends entirely on collective belief. But structured assets behave differently. Their relevance does not rely on short-term confidence. Their relevance relies on the long-term evolution of the system they were built for. XRP is engineered for a system that continues expanding even during crashes. This is why patterns emerge again and again. When the market collapses, XRP consolidates. When liquidity dries up, XRP continues functioning. When retail sentiment dies down, institutional development continues. This is not magic. This is design. Now let us explore one of the most important mechanics. XRP does not break under pressure because it was engineered for pressure. The global payment system experiences constant stress. Liquidity shortages, delayed settlement, currency mismatches, high operational costs, cross-border friction. These pressures are far more intense than anything retail speculation can create. XRP's design absorbs this pressure because the ledger was built for real-world use cases where reliability matters more than price. This brings us to the next mechanic, the difference between market-driven volatility and infrastructure-driven stability. Infrastructure-driven stability means that no matter how the market behaves, the underlying system continues operating seamlessly. XRP Ledger experiences continuous uptime even during severe market crashes. It does not halt. It does not freeze. It does not depend on centralized servers. In every crash, this consistency becomes more meaningful because crashes remind the world of the importance of dependable infrastructure. Now let us explore another key element, the separation between sentiment cycles and institutional cycles. Sentiment operates in short bursts, peaks of optimism, and floods of fear. Institutional cycles move slowly, intentionally, and independently of market emotion. Institutions do not rush in or out based on volatility. Institutions care about long-term viability. Institutions prepare for decades, not days. This long-term planning aligns with XRP because its purpose exists in the future of global value movement, not in the present noise of speculation. The blueprint teaches that when market cycles crash, institutional cycles remain unchanged, and XRP's relevance becomes more visible because the world continues moving toward modern settlement architecture. Now let us explore one of the strongest signals of resilience, that long-term holders understand the shift in global settlement expectations. The world is transitioning into an era where value moves instantly, payment networks communicate intelligently, liquidity becomes mobile, interoperability becomes mandatory, cryptographic settlement becomes standard. These trends accelerate during times of financial instability because instability exposes the weakness of outdated systems. When markets crash and banks experience liquidity shortages, the world becomes even more aware of the need for fast settlement and efficient liquidity movement. Crashes highlight the very problems XRP was designed to solve. This is why long-term holders see crashes not as chaos but as clarity. Now let us go deeper into the behavioral patterns of XRP during downturns. XRP has a history of consolidating during lower volatility ranges, then expanding when structural momentum builds in global finance. This behavior confuses short-term traders, but strengthens long-term conviction because it reveals the difference between speculative assets and infrastructural assets. Speculative assets inflate and deflate rapidly. Infrastructural assets build slowly and consistently. This slow build becomes more visible during crashes because speculation collapses and only structure remains. Let us now explore the blueprint from an emotional resilience perspective. In every downturn long-term, holders must anchor themselves to understanding. When someone knows why they hold something, fear loses power. When someone understands the shift happening in global finance, they stop reacting emotionally to short-term noise. The blueprint teaches that emotional resilience comes not from confidence, but from clarity. Confidence fluctuates. Clarity remains stable. Now we move into one of the most important ideas in the entire long-term holder mindset, understanding global momentum. Global momentum rises when multiple regions modernize at the same time. Europe updates its payment rails. Asia develops instant settlement corridors. The Middle East invests in real-time financial networks. Africa expands digital payments. North America builds instant clearing systems. Latin America integrates modern settlement frameworks. This global modernization strengthens during downturns because governments and institutions prioritize efficiency when economic pressure intensifies. Downturns increase modernization. Modernization increases demand for real-time settlement. Real-time settlement increases relevance of systems like XRP. This is why long-term holders feel more conviction during crashes, not less. Now we dive into the technological truth that underpins the blueprint. XRP Ledger continues functioning independently of market price. No matter how the market behaves, XRP Ledger executes transactions in seconds. No matter how sentiment behaves, XRP Ledger finalizes settlement without delay. This independence between function and price becomes the most powerful signal of resilience. Speculation rises and falls. Functionality does not. Speculation becomes emotional. Functionality remains objective. Speculation collapses during crashes. Functionality survives and strengthens. Now let us examine the role of regulatory clarity in the blueprint. Regulation is not driven by market cycles. Regulation is driven by systemic needs. Governments continue building digital asset frameworks even during downturns, because digital asset integration is part of the modernization of national financial systems. Crashes do not reverse regulation. Crashes accelerate it. Because during downturns, governments become more aware of the inefficiencies of outdated systems. Long-term holders see this pattern. When the market collapses, regulatory conversations become louder. When the market panics, institutions accelerate internal testing. When retail exits, institutions position themselves for the future. The blueprint teaches that global regulatory evolution supports, rather than undermines, the long-term case for XRP. Now let us talk about liquidity, efficiency, a core element of how XRP survives downturns. Liquidity in digital markets dries up during crashes, but XRP was engineered for environments where liquidity must remain efficient even under stress. Its role in bridging value does not diminish in volatility because systems designed for utility do not depend on price. The blueprint teaches that liquidity efficiency becomes even more important when the market is unstable, which is exactly when traditional systems break down. Now let us examine this psychological phase after a crash. The rebuilding of perspective. After every market collapse, the same thing happens. Those who panicked look back and realize they reacted to noise, not structure. Those who understood the asset's architecture realized that the crash had no impact on long-term relevance. The blueprint teaches that crashes are temporary, but infrastructure is permanent. Now, let us explore the core insight of the blueprint, that long-term survival is based on the asset's ability to remain useful regardless of price conditions. XRP's usefulness in settlement corridors does not depend on speculation. Cross-border settlement does not rely on hype. Real-time liquidity sourcing does not require market optimism. Utility continues even when markets fall apart. Now let us explore the long horizon perspective. Crashes feel large in the moment, but small in the timeline of global financial transformation. The world is undergoing one of the largest infrastructure shifts in history. Messaging standards are changing. Liquidity models are modernizing tokenized asset markets. Our emerging settlement rails are being rebuilt, national currencies are becoming digital, and interoperability is becoming a global requirement. This transformation spans decades. Volatility spans months. The blueprint teaches that your perspective must match the timeline of the system you are evaluating. Now we explore the climax of the blueprint, understanding why long-term holders become even more confident after experiencing multiple crashes. Because each crash confirms the same truth: XRP survives because its purpose does not disappear. The world continues modernizing. Institutions continue innovating. Settlement systems continue evolving. Crashes destroy speculation. Crashes do not destroy purpose. Crashes remove noise. Crashes highlight architecture. Crashes eliminate hype. Crashes reinforce utility. This is why XRP long-term holders do not fear downturns. They understand that the world is moving towards systems that require the exact features XRP provides. They understand that global modernization continues regardless of volatility. They understand that the relevance of real-time settlement only grows stronger during instability. So how does XRP survive crashes? It survives because it was built for a purpose deeper than market cycles. It survives because the world continues moving toward real-time value movement. It survives because its utility is independent of speculation. It survives because institutions care about infrastructure, not short-term price action. It survives because global modernization accelerates during downturns. It survives because the ledger continues functioning through every storm. It survives because it is aligned with the long-term direction of global finance. And this brings us to the final truth of the long-term holder blueprint. Your blueprint is built not on predictions, but on understanding. Understanding of the system XRP was built for. Understanding of the global shift happening around you. Understanding that market crashes are temporary, but the future of settlement is permanent. Understanding that the world is entering an era of instant global value movement, and XRP is already positioned inside that era. The blueprint is simple. Do not follow noise. Follow architecture. Do not follow emotion. Follow modernization. Do not follow speculation. Follow utility. Because in the end, what survives a crash is what was built to survive a crash. And this brings us to the final part of the blueprint for part one, recognizing the difference between temporary price volatility and long-term systemic positioning. Short-term volatility is emotional. Long-term positioning is structural. Short-term volatility is chaotic. Long-term positioning is predictable. Short-term volatility creates panic. Long-term positioning creates clarity. The blueprint teaches that XRP survives crashes because its relevance does not come from market cycles, but from global financial transformation. In the second half of this script, we will explore the mechanics of survival, how XRP behaves during downturns, why long-term holders develop stronger conviction during chaos, how global trends increase the relevance of XRP, and how understanding this blueprint can protect your clarity in the face of future volatility.